Hello, it is I, Collie Mortwood. Welcome to Tuesday Tales of Terror. This is episode 12 of Tuesday Tales of Terror, and we are continuing part 3 of Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree. And it looks as though we have landed in Egypt. So we flew on the kite and we landed in Egypt, and then there was a voice coming up from the dark tombs. We're following Mr. Mountain Shroud into the tombs. Also, happy spooky season, spooksters. We're in October, it's official now. Let us see. Chapter 9. Everyone ready? Let us begin. Andiamo. Let's go. Chapter 9. And from deep in the dry earth, a lost voice whispered, Mountain Shroud. Out of the darkness, something rolled, rushed, flapped. A long strip of mummy cloth snapped out into the sunlight. It was as if the very tomb itself had stuck out its old, dry tongue which lay at their feet. The boys stared. The linen strip was hundreds of yards long, and might, if they wished, lead them down into the mysterious deeps below the Egyptian earth. Tom Skelton, trembling, put one toe out to touch the yellow linen strip. A wind blew from the tombs, saying, Yes. Here I go, said Tom. And balancing on the tight rope of linen, he wandered down and vanished in the dark under the burial chambers. Yes, whispered the wind coming up from below. All of you come. Next, and next, and another, and another. Quick. The boys raced down the linen path in darkness. Watch for murder, boys. Murder. The pillars on both sides of the rushing boys flashed to life. Pictures shivered and moved. The golden sun was on every pillar, but it was a sun with arms and legs bound tight with mummy wrappings. Murder! Red rum. A dark creature struck the sun one dreadful blow. The sun died. Its fires went out. The boys ran blind in darkness. Yeah, thought Tom, running. Sure, I think every night the sun dies. Going to sleep, I wonder, will it come back? Tomorrow morning, will it still be dead? The boys ran. On new pillars, dead ahead, the sun appeared again, burning out of eclipse. Swell, thought Tom. That's it. Sunrise! But just as quickly the sun was murdered again. On each pillar they raced by, the sun died in autumn and was buried in cold winter. Middle of December, thought Tom. I often think the sun will never come back. Winter will go on forever. This time the sun is really dead. But as the boys slowed at the end of the long corridor, the sun was reborn. Spring arrived with golden horns. Light filled the corridor with pure fire. The strange god stood burning on every wall, his face a grand fire of triumph, wrapped in golden ribbons. Why, heck, I know who that is, panted Henry Hank. Saw him in a movie once with terrible Egyptian mummies. Osiris, said Tom. Yes, hissed Mountain Shroud's voice from the deep tombs. Lesson number 1 about Halloween. Osiris, son of the earth and sky, killed each night by his brother Darkness. Osiris, slain by autumn, murdered by his own night blood. So it goes in every country, boys. Each has its death festival, having to do with seasons. Skulls and bones, boys, skeletons and ghosts. In Egypt, lads, see the death of Osiris, king of the dead. Gaze long. The boys gazed, for they had come to a vast hole in the underground cavern, and through this hole they could look out at an Egyptian village where, at dusk, food was being placed out in pottery and copper dishes on porches and sills. For the homecoming ghosts, whispered Moundshroud, somewhere in the shadows. Rows of oil lamps were nailed to house fronts, and the soft smoke from these rose up on the twilight air like wandering spirits. You could almost see the haunts shifting along the cobbled streets. The shadows leaned away from the lost sun in the west and tried to enter the houses, but the warm food steaming on the porches kept the shadows circling and stirring. A faint smell of incense and mummy dust wafted up to the boys who looked out upon this ancient Halloween and the treats being set forth not for wandering boys, but for homeless ghosts. "Hey," whispered all the boys. "Do not lose your way in the dark," voices sang in the houses to harps and lutes. "Our dear sweet dead, come home and welcome here. Lost in the dark, but always dear. Do not wander, do not roam. Dear ones, come home, come home." You're welcome. Smoke curled from the dim lamps, and the shadows stepped up on the porches and, very gently, touched the gifts of food. And in one house they could see an old grandfather mummy being taken out of a closet and put in the place of honor at the head of the table, with food set before him. And the members of the family sat down to their evening meal and lifted their glasses and drank to the dead one seated there, all dust and dry silence. Chapter 10. "Quick now, come find me!" Moundshroud's voice, laughing, called them on. "This way! No, this! This!" You stop that. They ran along the slender ribbon of mummy wrapping, deep into the earth. "Yes, here I am!" They turned a corner and stopped, for the long linen ribbon wound across the tomb floor and up a wall to wrap around the feet of an ancient brown mummy, which was popped a tilt in a candlelit niche. Stuttered Ralph Bingstrom, dressed in his own mummy costume. Is that a real mummy?" "Yes." Dust sifted from under the golden mask on the mummy's face. "Real." "Mr. Moundshroud, you!" The gold mask fell to clang like a bright bell on the floor. Where the mask had been was a mummy's face, a pool of brown mud crinkled by blasts of sun. One eye was glued shut with spiderweb, the other eye cracked forth tears of dust and a glint of bright blue glass. "Is there some boy there dressed like a mummy?" asked the voice muffled beneath the shroud. "Why, me, sir," squeaked Ralph, showing his arms, legs, chest, the medical bandages it had taken him all afternoon to wrap himself up in, mummified. "Good," sighed Moundshroud. "Grab the linen strip. Pull!" Ralph bent, took hold of the ancient mummy bandages, and yanked. The ribbon unraveled up around to reveal the great ancient reptile nose beak and flaky chin, and dry-smelling dust-powdery mouth of Moundshroud. His crossed arms fell loose. "Thanks, lad. Free. No fun being wrapped like some old funeral gift for the land of the dead. But, hiss! Quick, boys. Hop in the niches. Stand stiff. Someone's coming. Play mummies, boys. Play dead." The boys leaped to stand, arms folded, eyes shut, breaths held, like a frieze of small mummies cut in the ancient rock. "Easy," whispered Mountroud. "Here comes a funeral procession, an army of mourners in gold and fine silks, bearing small sailing ship toys and copper bowls of food in their hands, and in their midst a mummy case carried light as sunshine on the shoulders of 6 men, and behind that a fresh wrapped mummy with new paintings on its linen vestments, and a small gold mask fitted over the hidden face. "See the food, boys, the toys," whispered Mountroud. "They put toys in the tombs, lads, so the gods will come play, romp, rust about, and run children happy to the land of the dead. See the boats, kites, jump ropes, toy knives." "But look at the size of that mummy," said Ralph inside his hot linen bandages. "It's a 12-year-old boy in there, like me, and that gold mask on the boy mummy's face. Doesn't it look familiar?" "Pipkin!" cried everyone hoarsely. "Shh!" hissed Mountroud. For the funeral had stopped. The high priests were glancing around through the flickering torch shadows. The boys, high in their niches, squeezed their eyes tight, sucked in their breaths. "Not a whisper," said Mountroud, a mosquito in Tom's ear. "Not a murmur." The harp music began again. The funeral shuffled on, and in the midst of all the gold and toys, the kites of the dead, there was the small 12-year-old, fresh new mummy with a gold mask that looked just exactly like Pipkin. "No, no, 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 no," thought Tom. "Yes," cried a mouse voice. Tiny, lost, wrapped away, kept, trapped, wild. "It's me. I'm here, under the mask, under the wrappings. Can't move, can't yell, can't fight free." "Pipkin," thought Tom. "Wait!" "Can't help it! Trapped!" shouted the small wee voice, wrapped in picture linens. "Follow! Meet me! Find me at—" The voice faded, for the funeral procession had turned a corner in the dark labyrinth and was gone. "Follow you where, Pipkin?" Tom Skelton jumped down from his niche and yelled into the dark. "Meet you where?" But at that exact moment, Mountroud, like a chopped tree, fell out of his niche. Bang! He struck the floor. "Wait!" he cautioned Tom, looking up at him with one eye that looked like a spider caught in its own web. "We'll save old Pipkin yet. Slide does it. Slide and creep, boys. Sss." They helped him up and unwound some of his mummy wrappings and tiptoed down the long corridor and turned the corner. "Holy cow," whispered Tom. "Look, they're putting Pipkin's mummy in the coffin, and the coffin inside the sarcophagus," Mountroud supplied the jaw cracker. "A coffin in a coffin in a coffin, lad, each larger than the last, all done up in hieroglyphs to tell his life story." "Pipkin's life?" said all. "Or whoever Pipkin was this time around, this year 4,000 years ago." "Yeah," whispered Ralph. "Look at the pictures on the sides of the coffin. Pipkin 1 year old, Pipkin 5, Pipkin 10 and running fast, Pipkin up an apple tree, Pipkin pretending to drown in the lake, Pipkin eating his way through a peach orchard. Wait, what's that?" Mountroud watched the busy funeral. "They're putting furniture in the tomb for him to use in the land of the dead. Boats, kites, tops to spin, fresh fruits should Pipkin wake 100 years from now, hungry. He'll be hungry all right." "Good grief, look, they're going out. They're closing the tomb." Mountroud had to grab and hold Tom, for he was jumping up and down in agony. "Pipkin's still in there, buried. When do we save him?" "Later. The long night is young. We'll see Pipkin again, never fear. Then the tomb door slammed shut. The boys yammered and yelled. In the dark they could hear the scrape and slosh of mortar filling the lost cracks and seams as the final stones were shoved in place. The mourners went away with their silent harps. Ralph stood in his mummy costume, stunned, watching the last shadows go. Is that why I'm dressed like a mummy? He fingered the bandages. He touched his clay-wrinkled ancient face. Is that what my part of Halloween is all about? Oh, boy. Oh, murmured Mountroud. The Egyptians, why they built to last. 10,000 years they planned for. Tombs, boys. Tombs, graves, mummies, bones, death. Death. Death was at the very heart, gizzard, light, soul, and body of their life. Tombs and more tombs with secret passages, so none might be found, so grave robbers could not borrow souls and toys and gold. You are a mummy, boy, because that was how they dressed for eternity. Spun up in a cocoon of threads, they hoped to come forth like lovely butterflies in some fat, dear, loving world. Know your cocoon, boy. Touch the strange stuffs. Far, dear, loving world, not fat. Why, said Ralph the Mummy, blinking at the smoky walls and old hieroglyphs. Every day was Halloween to them. Every day, gasped all in admiration. Every day was Halloween for them, too. Mountroud pointed. The boys turned. A kind of green electric storm simmered in the tomb dungeon. The ground shuddered as with an ancient earthquake. Somewhere a volcano turned over in its sleep, lighting the walls with one fiery shoulder. And on the walls beyond were prehistoric drawings of cavemen, long before the Egyptians. Now, said Mountroud. Lightning struck. Saber-toothed tigers caught the cavemen screaming. Tar pits drowned their homes. They sank, wailing. Wait, let's save a few with fire. Mountroud blinked. Lightning struck to burn forests. One ape-man running seized a burning branch and rammed it in a saber-tooth's jaws. The tiger shrieked and fell away. The ape-man, snorting in triumph, tossed the fiery branch into a pile of autumn leaves in its cave. Other men came to hold their hands out to the fire, laughing at the night where the yellow beast eyes waited, afraid. See, boys, Mountroud's face flickered with the fire. The days of the long cold are done. Because of this one brave, new-thinking man, summer lives in the winter cave. But, said Tom, what's that got to do with Halloween? What do? Why, blast my bones, everything. When you and your friends die every day, there's no time to think of death, is there? Only time to run. But then you stop at long last. He touched the walls. The ape-men froze in mid-flight. Now you have time to think of where you came from, where you're going. And fire lights the way, boys. Fire and lightning. Morning stars to gaze at. Fire in your own cave to protect you. Only by night fires was the caveman, beastman, able to turn his thoughts on a spit and face them with wonder. The sun died in the sky. Winter came on like a great white beast, shaking its fur, burying them. Would spring ever come back to the world? Would the sun be reborn next year, or stay murdered? Egyptians asked it. Cavemen asked it 1,000,000 years before. Will the sun rise tomorrow morning? And that's how Halloween began? With such long thoughts at night, boys, and always at the center of it, fire. The sun dying down the cold forever. How that must have scared early man, eh? That was the big death. the sun went away forever. Then what? So in the middle of autumn's everything dying, 8 men turned in their sleep, remembered their old dead of the last year. Ghosts called in their heads. Memories, that's what ghosts are. But 8 men didn't know that. Beyond their eyelids, late nights, the memory ghosts called, waved, danced. So 8 men woke up, tossed twigs on the fire, shivered, swept. They could drive away wolves, but not memories, not ghosts. So they held tight to their ribs, prayed for spring, watched the fire, thanked invisible gods for harvests of fruit and nuts. Halloween indeed! 1,000,000 years ago in a cave in autumn with ghosts inside heads and the sun lost. Mallintraud's voice faded. He unraveled another yard or 2 of mummy wrappings, draped them over his arm grandly, and said, "More to see. Come on, boys." And they walked out of the catacombs into the twilight of an old Egyptian day. A great pyramid lay before them, waiting. "Last one to the top," said Mallintraud, "is a monkey's uncle," and the monkey's uncle was Tom. How long is this chapter? Let's go for it. Chapter 11. Gasping, they reached the pyramid's top, where they waited, a vast crystal lens, a viewing glass which spun slowly in the wind on a golden tripod, a gigantic eye with which to bring far places near. In the west, the sun, smothered and dying in clouds, sank. Mallintraud hooted his delight. "There it goes, boys, the heart, soul, and flesh of Halloween, the sun. There Osiris is murdered again. There sinks Mithras, the Persian fire. There falls Phoebus, Apollo, all Grecian light. Sun and flame, boys, look and blink. Turn that crystal spyglass. Swing it down the Mediterranean coast 1,000 miles. See the Greek Isles." "Sure," said plain George Smith, dressed up as a fancy pale ghost. "Cities, towns, streets, houses, people jumping out on porches to bring food." "Yes," Mallintraud said, "the festival of the dead. The feast of pots, trick or treat, old style, but tricks from the dead if you don't feed them, so treats are laid out in fine banquets on the sill. Far away in the sweet dusk, smells of cooked meats steamed. Dishes were dealt out for spirits that smoked across the land of the living. The women and children of the Grecian homes came and went with multitudinous quantities of spiced and delectable victuals. Then all through the Grecian Isles doors slammed. The vast slamming echoed along the dark wind. "The temple shutting tight," said Mallintraud. "Every holy place in Greece will be double-locked this night." "And look!" Ralph, who was a mummy, swung the crystal lens. The light flared over the boys' masks. "Those people, why are they painting black molasses on the front door posts?" "Pitch," corrected Mallintraud. "Black tar to glue the ghosts, stick them fast so they can't get inside." "Why," said Tom, "didn't we think of that?" Darkness moved down the Mediterranean shores. From the tombs, like mist, the dead spirits wavered in soot and black plumes along the streets, to be caught in the dark tar that smeared the porch sills. The wind mourned, as if telling the anguish of the trapped dead. Now, Italy, Rome. Mallintraud turned the lens to see Roman cemeteries where people placed food on graves and hurried off. Ooh. The wind whipped Mallintraud's cape. It hollowed his mouth. "Oh, autumn winds that bake and burn, and all the world to darkness turn. Now storm and season make of me a swarm of leaves from autumn's tree." He kick jumped straight up in the air. The boys yelled delight, even as his clothes, cape, hair, skin, body, corn candy bones tore apart before their eyes. Leaves burn, change, turn. The wind ribboned him to confetti. 1,000,000 autumn leaves, gold, brown, red as blood, rust all wild, simmering, a clutch of oak and maple leaf, a hickory leaf downfall, a toss of flaking whisper, a murmur rustled to the dark River Creek sky. Not one kite, but 10,000 tiny mummy flake kites. Moundshroud exploded apart. World turn, leaves burn, grass die, trees fly. And from 1,000,000,000 other trees in autumn lands, leaves rushed to join with the upflung battalions of dry bits that were Moundshroud, dispersed in whirlwinds from which his voice stormed. Boys, see the fires along the Mediterranean coast. Fires burning north through Europe. Fires of fear. Flames of celebration. Would you spy, boys? Up now, fly! And the leaves, in avalanche, fell upon each boy like terrible flapping moths and carried them away. Over Egyptian sands they sang and laughed and giggled. Over the strange sea, rapturous and hysterical, they soared. Happy New Year! A voice cried from below. Happy what? Asked Tom. Happy New Year, Moundshroud. A flock of rusty leaves rustled his voice. In old times, the first old November was New Year's Day, the true end of summer, the cold start of winter. Not exactly happy, but well. Happy New Year! They crossed Europe and saw new water below. The British Isles, whispered Moundshroud. Would you cock an eye at England's own druid god of the dead? We would! Quiet as milkweed then, soft as snow, fall, blow away down, each and all. The boys fell like a bushel of chestnuts, their feet rammed to earth. And that is all we have time for, unfortunately. I was hoping that we could finish chapter 12 tonight, but it's still another 5 pages, and we have 3 minutes left. Screw it. We're going for it, because I like even numbers. Chapter 12. Now the boys who landed like a downpour of bright autumn trash were in this order. Tom Skelton, dressed up in his delicious bones. Henry Hank, more or less, a witch. Ralph Bingstrom, an unraveled mummy becoming more unbandaged by the minute. A ghost named George Smith. JJ, no other name needed. A very fine ape man. Wally Babb, who said he was a gargoyle, but everyone said he looked more like Quasimodo. Fred Fryer, what else but a beggar fresh out of a ditch. And last but not least, Hackles Nibley, who had run up a costume in the last minute by simply clapping on a white scare mask and grabbing his grandpa's harvest scythe off the garage wall. All the boys being safely landed on English earth, their 1,000,000,000 autumn leaves fell off and blew away. They stood in the midst of a vast field of wheat. Here, Master Nibley, I brought your scythe. Take it, grab. Now lie low, warned Moundshroud. The druid god of the dead, Samhain, fall. They fell, for a huge scythe came skimming down out of the sky. With its great razor edge it cut the wind. With its whistling side it sliced clouds. It beheaded trees. It razored along the cheek of the hill. It made a clean shave of wheat. In the air a whole blizzard of wheat fell. And with every whisk, every cut, every scythe, the sky was aswarm with cries and shrieks and screams. The scythe hissed up. The boys cowered. "Huh!" grunted a large voice. "Mr. Moundshroud, is that you?" cried Tom. For towering 40 feet above them in the sky, an immense scythe in his hands, was the cowled figure, its face in midnight fogs. The blades swung down. Hiss! "Mr. Moundshroud, let us be!" "Shut up!" Someone knocked Tom's elbow. Mr. Moundshroud lay on the earth beside him. That's not me. That's Samhain, cried the voice in the fog. God of the dead, I harvest thus and so. Swoosh! All those who died this year are here, and for their sins this night are turned to beasts. Swoon! Please, whispered Ralph the mummy. Zzzt! The scythe zippered Hackles Nibley's spine, ripping his costume in a long tear, knocking his own small scythe free of his hands. Beasts! And the harvest wheat flailed up, spun round on the wind, shrieking its souls. All those who had died in the past 12 months rained to earth, and falling, touching, the heads of wheat were turned to asses. Chickens, snakes which scurried, cackled, brayed, were turned to dogs and cats and cows that barked, cried, bawled. But they were all miniature. All were tiny, small, no bigger than worms, no bigger than toes, no bigger than the sliced-off tip of a nose. By the hundreds and thousands the wheat heads snowed up in scatters and fell down as spiders, which could not shout or beg or weep for mercy, but which, soundless, raced over the grass, poured over the boys. 100 centipedes tiptoed on Ralph's spine. 200 leeches clung to Hackles Nibley's scythe, until with a nightmare gasp he raved and shook them off. Everywhere fell black widows and tiny boa constrictors. For your sins, take that, and this, bellowed the voice in the whistling sky. The scythe flashed, the wind cut, fell in bright thunders. The wheat churned and gave up 1,000,000 heads. Heads fell, sinners hit like rocks, and hitting were turned to frogs and toads and multitudes of scaly warts with legs and jellyfish which stank in the light. I'll be good, prayed Tom. Let me live, added Henry Hank. All of this said very loudly, for the scythe was making a dreadful roar. It was like an ocean wave, falling down out of the sky, cleaning a beach and running away up to cut more clouds. Even the clouds seemed to be whispering out swift and more fervent prayers for their own fates. Not me, not me. For all the evil you ever did, said Samhain. And the scythe cut, and the souls were harvested, and fell in blind newts and awful bedbugs and dreadful cockroaches to scuttle, limp, creep, scrabble. My gosh, he's a bug maker, flea squasher, snake grinder outer, roach transformer, fly keeper. No, Samhain, October god, god of the dead. Samhain stomped a great foot which tread 1,000 bugs in the grass, trampled 10,000 tiny souled beasts in the dust. I think, said Tom, it's time we ran, suggested Ralph, not offhand. Shall we take a vote? The scythe hissed. Samhain boomed. Vote! Heck! Said Moundshroud. All jumped up. You there, thundered the voice above them. Come back. No thanks, sir, said one and then another, and put right foot after left. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to show you this picture of all the little creatures that Samhain is turning these beings into. We're almost there. We have a page left. I figure, said Ralph, panting, leaping, tears on his cheeks. I've been pretty good most of my life. I don't deserve to die. "Ha-ha!" shouted Samhain. The scythe came in a guillotine which chunked the head off an oak tree and felled a maple. A whole orchard of autumn apples fell into a marble pit somewhere. It sounded like a house full of boys falling downstairs. I don't think he heard you, Ralph, said Tom. They dived. They fell among rocks and shrubs. The scythe ricocheted off the stones. Samhain gave such a yell as brought an avalanche down a small hill nearby. Boy, said Ralph, squinched up, balled up, feet against chest, eyes tight. England is no place to be a sinner. Even as a final rain, a shower, a downpour of hysterical souls turned beetle, turned flea, turned stink bug, turned daddy longlegs, scurried over the boys. "Hey, look! That dog!" A wild dog, mad with terror, raced at the rocks, and its face, its eyes, something in the eyes. That couldn't be. "Pipkin?" said everyone. "Pip!" shouted Tom. "Is this where we meet you?" But whoom! The scythe fell, and yipping with fright, the dog bowled over, slid down the grass. "Hold on, Pipkin! We know you! We see you! Don't scare off! Don't—" Tom whistled, but the dog, yarping with Pipkin's own dear, sweet, scared voice, was gone. But didn't an echo of his yip come back from the hills? "Me, me, me, me." Where, thought Tom. Criminally, where? And that is the end of chapter 12. Wonderful. And I'll leave us here. Thank you so much for staying with me a little bit over. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. And we will carry on next Tuesday for our 14th, 12th, 13th installment. And we'll be starting lucky number chapter 13. That works out really well. Wonderful. So I'll see you next Tuesday. And until then, of course, as always, stay spooky. Mwah.